to the members of the Friends of the IDF family, and to the greater community. We want to wish everyone a meaningful day, a meaningful weekend, and a meaningful beginning of 2024. Today, we have two incredibly special guests. Many of you know from Fox, from CNN, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan Conricus, his story itself is a fascinating story, but he literally is the face of Israel. He's the face of the events of what are happening on behalf of the IDF. He's articulate, he's thoughtful, he's insightful. And it's an incredible lesson for us in the last briefing that we're doing here in 2023 to have him as our special guest. And as well, to provide analysis, to provide depth and insight, Major General Nadav Padan. We're going to start it off with Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. And Jonathan, if you don't mind, before you give us a briefing and an analysis, share a little bit about yourself. Your personal story is also a fascinating story. If you don't mind giving us a little insight.
Yes, hello, Steve. Hello, everyone. Shalom. As always, a pleasure to be speaking with and to be part of anything that the FIDF does. I know that this has been a very, very meaningful year for the organization and consequently, as a result of that, for the IDF and all those who fight for Israel. And I am very thankful for that. And I think you've been doing a tremendous job through these very difficult times. It feels a bit, odd to be talking about yourself when we're in the war, but I'll just say briefly, I'm a very proud Israeli, blessed with 4 children, live in central Israel, 4 children and an amazing wife. Have served for 24 years in the military, started like most Israelis do as a combat soldier, fought in Lebanon, in Gaza, as a platoon commander and company commander and battalion operations officer, and have since been doing all kinds of international relations and military diplomacy. My last job in the IDF was the international spokesperson, an assignment that I finished 2 years ago. And like so many others, countless Israelis who all understood that on the 7th of October, things changed and that we needed all to first report for duty and then ask for them to have the paperwork ready. I knew that my ability to contribute was through media engagement and basically to help the people of the spokesperson unit do their job and alleviate some of the tremendous pressure. And that is what I've been doing. Today, I'm going to sign off, and this is actually the last briefing I'm doing so far. We don't know what 2024 will bring, but so far, I'm going to sign off from reserve duty for the time being. And like many other Israelis, going back to a semi-civilian life, even though life in Israel is very strange these days, a war is ongoing. If you look at the amount of traffic in Tel Aviv, you could think that we're back to normal, but then you travel an hour south of Tel Aviv or 2 hours north of Tel Aviv, and you're in war zones. And I've been both along the Gaza border last week and along the Lebanese border last week as well. And today I came back from a quick tour and an overview of Nablus. Very interesting to see the different contrasting areas. And to begin, 86 days, and I'll have a look at the numbers so I get everything right, but 86 days of fighting, the casualty rate is absolutely staggering. Unfortunately, sadly, but I think that is where, of course, we have to start the conversation. There are still 129 Israeli hostages that remain in Hamas captivity. We have 506 fallen soldiers in total. That is October the 7th and up until today, out of which 172 from the day we started ground operations, maneuvers. Those are regular and reserve soldiers from all across the IDF, and more than 2,200 wounded soldiers that are in various stages of recovery. There's been casualties reported today as well, and as every day goes on, fighting goes on. We kill a lot of terrorists, we take apart a lot of their infrastructure, we deliver significant damage to the enemy's fighting capabilities, but sadly, we also sustain casualties every day. we get information about families that are notified of the situation. So just a quick recap of where we're standing today. The active fronts, I'll go through them really quickly. Fighting is ongoing. It is quite intense all over the Gaza Strip. We still have lots of fighting units in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and fighting continues and intensifies in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, where our both reserve and regular troops are fighting in the densely populated areas of Khan Yunis, looking to expand maneuvers and to continue to fight all over the southern part of the Gaza Strip, and focusing on fighting above ground. And a lot of our combat power is on the underground. The very extensive tunnel network that Hamas and the other terrorists have built. Every day we uncover more shafts, more entrances to tunnels. We connect between different shafts and understand the network that Hamas has put in place, and we simply destroy or render useless every day more and more parts of Hamas's infrastructure. I don't think that we are anywhere near being done, and it would be something that would be misleading to speak about, us being done in the northern part or anywhere else. This is still a very active combat area, a battlefield, with an enemy that understands that I think the enemy is starting to understand that it won't have a place to go. And we're seeing enemy combatants fight with greater fierceness than what we've seen them fight before, probably because they understand that we are not going to allow them to go anywhere. So they can go out fighting or they can surrender. And many are choosing to surrender to Israeli troops in the south, and some try to go out fighting and to take Israeli soldiers with them. As fighting goes on in southern Israel, Israeli civilians, 86 days from October the 7th, are still not capable of returning to their homes. It's about 100,000 Israelis. The official number is a little bit less than that, but I think that the unofficial real number is more than that. But we're talking about approximately 200,000 Israelis in total from the southern part of Israel and from the northern part of Israel that have been outside of their homes, evacuated from their homes for the better part of 3 months. Very soon, we're very near the 3-month mark as we're crossing day 86. So fighting continues in the south. In the north, there's fighting. It is of varying levels of intensity. Each day we see the enemy, Hezbollah, sometimes ratcheting up the violence and sometimes ratcheting down. We are, in most cases, responding. That is the strategic directive for the IDF, is to contain the situation, to defend along the northern border, to make Hezbollah, of course, pay a price for what it's doing, but not yet to turn the northern border into the main theater of operations. The main theater, the main effort of the IDF in the state of Israel is still in Gaza. And once that is completed, then maybe the situation may change, and then maybe the guidance for the IDF vis-a-vis northern Israel and Hezbollah will change. But that's an if, and we'll see when that will happen. We're fighting all along the so-called blue line, the border. That's 80 miles of border, of very challenging terrain, where we have also, as I said before, evacuated our civilians. And on one hand, I'm happy that Hezbollah has sustained a lot of combat casualties. They've crossed the 130 mark of dead combatants, well-trained terrorists, and enemy combatants that we have taken out. I don't think that Hezbollah had planned for this. But then on the other hand, I am very unsatisfied with the fact that Israeli civilians are not in their homes. And it is a very delicate situation along the border. I think everybody understands, decision makers, elected officials, senior military, they all understand, and they say it quite clearly, that this is an unsustainable situation and that the war will not end without something decisive happening along the border. Now, even though it is the end of the year break and most people are not working, There is a lot going on as we speak behind the scenes related to diplomatic efforts in Lebanon, led by the US with French involvement, and maybe General Padan will speak about it and elaborate more. I'll say what I can see from my perspective. We're seeing, I think, many important countries around the world responding to messages delivered by the State of Israel, the core message being, this cannot continue. We either solve it through diplomatic efforts and provide a diplomatic solution, or we will use the tools that we have at our disposal, military tools. Either way, Israelis being forced out of their homes, not being safe in their homes, and being evicted by Israeli authorities from their homes is something that we cannot allow to continue, and that situation needs to be solved. And I think that will be a very, very dominant factor shaping 2014. If to summarize 2014, it's never wise to try to summarize anything while you're in the middle of doing it. And in Israel, we are really in the middle of fighting, and there's really no spirit of summarizing anything. I think that we can perhaps say that 2023 was the year when the worst terror attack occurred against Israel, when the largest amount of Israelis were killed by enemies, and when we suffered the most humiliating and difficult military attack that we ever faced by a state and a non-state actor. That I think we can say about 2014, and we can also say, 2013, and we can also say that this is the year where the Iranian axis around Israel, where Iranian weapons, money, equipment, political guidance, extremism, and military strategy really is coming to the fore, and for the world to see, for Israelis to see, and for the world to see what Iran built around Israel, what it is now using against Israel, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and Hezbollah in Lebanon to a certain extent, Iranian proxies in Syria, and of course the Houthis in Yemen, all of that happening at once, and there's a few other parts that I have not yet mentioned. But if to put any kind of two headlines to summarize 2023, October 7 and Iranian fingerprints that are becoming more and more exposed as the day goes by. Maybe, Steve, if you want to guide into another area before I just continue speaking, do you want to say perhaps what people would think?
First and foremost, I want to thank you. For those who are participating in today's briefing, over the course of the last 86 days, probably at least 15 to 18 times, we've had the honor of having Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. And let me describe to you, he's in Israel. We've had him, what would be, let's say, 1 a.m. on the East Coast doing briefings in Vegas. We've had him doing briefings in almost every city in America. And in the time that he's doing it, Israel time is 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 2 in the morning, multiple hours of the night. He did not sleep during the dark over the course of the last 86 days. And his ability to communicate, his ability to engage, his ability to respond to questions, we, not only the friends of the IDF, are profoundly grateful to you, but to those who saw you on the major networks, those who saw you on these these late night programs across cable television, across mainstream network television. We really want to thank you for what you've done. I understand this is your last briefing. You're going back to your family. I wish that were true. Chances are they're probably going to be utilizing you quite often in 2024. And all I can say is to you and to your family, we're profoundly grateful to you. One question I want to ask you, I'll ask a couple of questions. You started to elaborate that now that Israel really has encircled Khan Yunis, Israel's starting now to play a role in terms of its control over Rafah or Rafiah. The same is true of some of the eastern communities in the northern Gaza. So you said that some of the Hamas terrorists, they're really fighting to the death. And at the same time, some of them realize there is no future, the end is over, and they're giving up. Can you elaborate on both sides and both groups as to what you're seeing and what's happening in whether it's in southern Gaza, whether it's in northern Gaza, on that issue?
Yes, thank you for your kind words. And as I said before, I am very appreciative of what your organization, what you are doing, and of course for the people here taking their precious time listening and helping, contributing, sending both material support and emotional support to all of us here in Israel. I'd say this, we've been looking at how the enemy has been responding to our ground operations. And there is a slight difference between how they responded in the beginning of our ground maneuver and how they're in the northern part of Gaza and how they are responding now. And we see more terrorists revealing themselves, exposing themselves while trying to attack our forces in the south than what we saw in the north. And you could draw the conclusion that they are understanding that we, despite what they may have thought and hoped for, that they'd be able to use the hostages or international pressure or the UN or other humanitarian organizations or whatever international media in order to force us to stop. All of those hopes have come to naught for the terrorists, and we are not going to stop. It is clear, and if you visit the troops on the ground, they have a very clear message to any senior Israeli personality, whether it's military or political, and they're saying, we are here on the ground. We know that we are in harm's way, but we want to get the job done. We understand that there is no way for Israelis to feel safe in their homes without us finishing Hamas, making sure that they don't have neither a command structure and an ability to govern, nor the military capacity to execute any attacks against Israel, anything of significance. We understand on the ground that this needs to be done. We understand that it's a dangerous endeavor, but we are willing to do it. And this message permeates up, and it is said loud and clear by the Israeli soldiers on the ground and by the officers on the ground. And I'm happy that leaders are hearing it and acting upon it. And I think that our enemies are understanding it as well. And that is why they are operating as they are. When we look ahead and think, okay, what needs to happen for this to be decided, for us to be able to declare that we're done with Hamas, Israel needs to cut the tunnels that cross from Egyptian Rafah and are basically the lifeline of the terrorist organizations. This is how the weapons have been coming in all of these years from Egypt into the Gaza Strip. This is how the Iranians have been able to provide Hamas and the Islamic Jihad with advanced weaponry, with money, with equipment, with uniforms, with ammunition. Everything that they have, almost everything that they have, came in through these tunnels, and they need to be shut. Until Israel does that, I don't think that we can say that we have defeated Hamas or really changed the situation strategically. In order to do so, there's a few ways. There's more than one way of skinning a cat, but in order to do so, Israel will probably need to control what we call the Philadelphia corridor, and to be able to operate freely above those tunnels in order to dismantle them using various engineering tools at our disposal, and hopefully do that as quickly as possible, as swiftly as possible, and then that will be a decisive factor. I think that from a fighting spirit point of view of the enemy, we will need to take out many seniors, and it will be important to take out some of the symbols of Hamas, specifically Yahya Sinwar and Muhammad Def, but not only them. And I don't see this really ending significantly without one or two or both of them being taken off the battlefield by Israel. And then we will have to look for a cumulative effect. Seniors, tunnels, combat infrastructure, weapons, and a general sense for the enemy that the IDF is everywhere, that the noose around their neck is tightening, and that there is no way to remain in their tunnels underground, and that the only way for them to survive, unlike thousands of their comrades that have fought and died at the hands of the IDF, the only way for them to survive is to surrender. That and of course to release our hostages. That is how I see this situation ending tactically from a military point of view. Then there's a whole other discussion: what happens on the so-called day after, what mechanisms will be in place, how will we prevent immediately Hamas and other extremist organizations from trying to rebuild and continuing fighting. That is also a big and very significant stage that the government of Israel, together with the IDF and the other security organizations, needs to define a strategy for. Of course, first we have to get there, but we have to have a strategy ready in order to implement.
Please wait while we reconnect.
Jonathan, you were speaking about Iran and Iran's control of the proxies and some of the consequences that Iran has lost many senior IRGC members in Syria and in Iraq at that point before we were off for a moment. If you could just go back to that point.
Yeah, so I think this will be it can be, and I hope that it will be a key characteristic of 2024, right? First, the undoing of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and to bring about a new security reality there, which will take time, but we are making good progress in order to achieve that. But if we zoom out, then there definitely is an Israeli opportunity here, together with the US and other positive, democratic, freedom-loving, and prosperity-loving countries of the world, to look at the Middle East and to say, who brings all of the instability, the violence, the weapons, the extremism, and the terror, and from looking at the Middle East in the last 3 months, and more so the last month, after the Houthis in Yemen have become increasingly involved, and after Iranians themselves have been firing at international maritime vessels out in international waters, I think this is becoming increasingly clear. And perhaps in 2024, we will see exactly a response by Israel, by the US and other countries against this aggression. If that happens, then that has the potential of really shifting the trajectory of the Middle East, because up until now, the only country that has been actively undermining Iranian aggression and standing up to Iranian aggression has been Israel. We definitely have skin in the game, and we have been fighting against the Iranians, standing up to their aggression, because they are, of course, aggressing against us. So we have a clear incentive to do so. But I think now, when the cards are exposed on the table for the world to see that the Iranian-sent Houthis are threatening to destabilize international shipping and trade, which will have global ramifications, when we see Iranians taking arms and firing themselves from Iranian naval vessels at international civilian merchant ships, when we see them continuing to strike American bases all over the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria, and in other locations, and when we see Hezbollah and Hamas from Lebanon and from Gaza continue to try to indiscriminately kill our civilians and to fight against Israel, I think this will be a very good opportunity, not only for Israel, but for other countries in the world to actually do something about it, and by doing something about it, changing for the good the situation in the Middle East. I think that 2024 will be a very challenging year for Israel. We will have many efforts to deal with. There will continue to be terror activity in Judea and Samaria. I overlooked Nablus today, and I saw a convoy of Israeli troops exiting early morning hours, exiting one of the camps, one of the terrorist strongholds outside of Nablus. This is called the Askar camp. And as they were exiting, a very large IED was detonated by terrorists. Thankfully, not a very high quality one and not at the correct timing. So there were no Israeli casualties, but a very large explosion that I could hear from about almost a mile away. And I think that we will see continued escalation there. That front is not over, and Israelis will continue to have to fight there and defend ourselves against Palestinian terror. We will, of course, have to continue and finish the job in Gaza. And before Israelis can go back to their homes, we will have to fundamentally change the security situation along the northern border. Each one of these challenges in itself is a very tall order for any country to deal with, and Israel in 2024 will have to deal with all of these, and perhaps even with more. So I think we're looking at a challenging year for the State of Israel, for our armed forces, the entire security establishment. And of course, we will have to assess, and with this I will conclude, we will have to learn from what went wrong, how we failed so miserably on October the 7th, what we need to do in order to prevent that from ever happening again, and to prepare ourselves for the challenges that lay ahead. So I don't know if there's time for New Year's commitments and resolutions. I think the resolution for the IDF should be to learn, improve, finish the job in Gaza, and create a totally different security situation along the northern border while defending against Palestinian terrorism in Judea and Samaria. All of that at once, simultaneously, which means that Israel will need all the support it can get from the US, our only and real ally around the world, and of course, any other friend and ally that we have in terms of Western countries. But a challenging year ahead.
Jonathan, thank you. To put it mildly, it's an incredibly challenging year. And the needs here, look, we hear it each and every day from the General Staff, from the Ministry of Defense, the humanitarian, the medical needs, and that's a reflection of the incredible military needs that they have, the job that they have in terms of, as you said, it's a multi-tiered, it's a 6-7-tiered war. And what Israel's doing is really at the forefront of humanity. It's going to shape and determine the future of the 21st century. Thank you for the in-depth analysis. Thank you for your frankness. And thank you for your comprehensiveness in the way that you've described it. I hope that we will not be bothering you this year in 2024, that you'll be able to go back to your family. I just have a sense that we'll probably be seeing you many times this year.
We will, and once that will be relevant, I will be there.
Thank you. And wishing you and your family peace, blessings, wishing the State of Israel, the people of Israel, safety, security, and blessings in 2024.
Thank you. And the brave men and women fighting on the battlefield as we're speaking. And thanks to your support, they're doing a better job. And I thank you for it.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to be turning to Major General Nadav Padan. Major General Padan will be sharing with us an update since we've spoken to him this past Wednesday. A lot has happened in the field. A lot has happened up north, down south, and to get his insight and analysis.
Hi, good afternoon, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well, Major General.
Great. First of all, I want to respond to the way that Jonathan wrap up the situation in Israel and remind ourselves that Israel, from the very existence of the state of Israel, fighting their life to wake up every morning in Israel. Well, before October 7, we used to spend 80% of our combat soldier defending the border between Israel and Lebanon, fighting our daily security life in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza Strip and so on and so on. So the fact that we have a lot of challenges, it's not a new fact. What we know how to deal with it. As long as it's a normal level of friction, we can live our life with prosperity in Israel, while the IDF are doing the job of securing the border and the settlements and the line between Israel and the Palestinian area and Judea and Samaria. So it's definitely a challenge, but we know how to live with it. So yeah, we have to take it at the right perspective and not be that pessimistic about it. We can make our life and create amazing life in Israel while dealing with a lot of challenges surrounding Israel, and we'll have to deal with them at the near future. The near future, I mean the year to come. If I'll do like a bird's eye view of what's going on in Israel and fly from the diplomatic effort and the involvement of the superpowers in the Middle East and get deep and deeper into the situation in Gaza, I will start with the effort of the US. And we have to remind ourselves, because I'm getting a lot of questions about the involvement of the US. The US is very involved of what's going on in Israel. We all heard about the sign for another delivery of ammunition yesterday, but it's not start and not end there. The diplomatic effort to get to agreement between Israel and Lebanon, the diplomatic effort to find an offer to release our hostages in Gaza, the 129 people under the capacity of the Hamas in Gaza. The negotiation along and the creation of the coalition against the Houthis and fighting the naval routes in the Saudi Arabia Peninsula area and in the Red Gulf. So there is a lot of effort that the U.S. are doing in the Middle East, from diplomatic effort to actually fighting the Houthis on a daily basis and creating a coalition that could fight the Houthis on a daily basis. Not to mention all the British American bases that are dealing with friction along the border between Iraq and Syria and in Iraq as general. About the Iranian, we already mentioned that there is a change from situation that the Iranian are playing kind of neutral state that's supporting the effort of the Palestinian to fight their goals, to taking responsibility of what's going on in the Middle East. And to my understanding, we're a minute or a mile before getting to the conclusion, the obvious conclusion that we have to get to, that the head of the octopus is Iran. If you want to solve the issue with the Houthis, if you want to solve the issue with Hezbollah, you have to deal with Iran. There is no way to run away from it. And we can see that when the British minister actually turned to Iran and pushed them to ask the Houthis to stop their terror activities and the terror activity at Eilat and the Red Gulf, he's got response. So Iran is pushing things behind, we know, but Iran not only pushing things behind, but taking responsibilities since the last week. The other thing that happened with the Iranians, that they are accelerating their effort to send accurate ammunition and special equipment to Hezbollah to get prepared to welcome Israeli attack in Lebanon. It's thing that you can see by observing the amount of attack that Israel or other are launching in Syria, trying to prevent this access of evil to become an open highway, open road of ammunition and equipment from Iran to Lebanon. We heard and we know that Iran is accelerating the enrichment of nuclear materials, which is quite a challenge, and we'll have to deal with it. They use the fog and the smoke of the war in the Middle East to push their own strategic thing. when we are getting down from Iran to Hezbollah, we can see that Hezbollah is trying to extend their tools and their attack toward Israel. We spoke about the new method. While they know that the Israel citizens withdraw from the north villages and north kibbutzim along the border between Israel and Lebanon, they destroy their houses and make damages. So they continue with this method, along with trying to attack strategic bases of the IDF. And they're accelerating, as been mentioned from the other side, the path of the axis of evil between Iran and Lebanon. When it comes to Judea and Samaria, we are running a war in Judea and Samaria. If it wasn't for what happened at the south and in the north, and we were focusing on what happened in Judea and Samaria the last few weeks, we are doing operation and things that we never did the last almost 20 years. Conricus mentioned what happened in Nablus yesterday. The day before, we launched the same operation in the area of Tulkarem, and the day before in Jenin. So there is an operation running after another in Judea and Samaria area, and we're using tools and effort that we didn't use in the past, which means that the challenge is different. And if I go to the main arena to the south, we can see three things. First of all, the crack and motivation of the terrorists are getting lower and lower, and we can see a greater number of terrorists that give it up and just get up from the shuffles, from the tunnels, raise their hand and give themselves to the IDF. We can see the amount of friction that getting mainly at the north, but not only, to a situation that we can actually reduce the amount of power we need to take neighborhoods, to take bases and position of Hamas. And it's been mentioned, there will no be kind of binary 0 and 1 kind of changes at the development of the operation, and we can feel by the level of friction, by the way that the local people respond to the IDF, that we're moving from one stage to another. So we're close to finish the second stage and move to the third. Moving to the third means that we'll have to use less ammunition, less airstrike, and less boots on the ground to achieve the same kind of goals. And we have a list of goals that we have to achieve in Gaza Strip. It will take time to clean the area of Gaza Strip from terrorists. We say it again and again. When we're speaking about time, generally speaking, I can say that it's going to be longer than a year. And definitely we'll have to deal with the Philadelphia corridor, the border between Israel and Egypt. That's quite a complicated challenge. To mention all of us that we used to control this corridor, and even when we control it, we didn't block all the smuggling along the border. It's a challenge. We'll have to fight it. It doesn't mean that you cannot reduce to a very low number the amount of smuggling, but it's a challenge that should be coordinated with the Egyptian. There is an effort that run by the US to build the same kind of obstacle that we build along the border of Gaza Strip between Egypt and Gaza Strip. The Egyptians are not saying no. Hopefully they'll accept it, and we'll continue with this effort and block the ability to very easily dig tunnels under the border. So that's one thing. And the other thing is to clean the center and the south part of Gaza Strip from terrorists. And we can see that there is different kind of method that the IDF used. If we went line after line, neighborhood after neighborhood at the north part. When it comes to Khan Yunis, we surrounded the city and launching a brigade strike into the center of gravity of the city. And we can see what happened at the center refugee camp in Deir al-Balah and other places that are where the IDF used different kind of method. I think that the Hamas leadership under lots of pressure, although they are making noises like they're controlling everything, they're not. They're losing bit by bit their ability to control things. And I think that the negotiation and the strength will lead us to a situation that they could accept negotiation to release the hostages, hopefully. And if not, we'll have to do it ourselves, boots on the ground. With boots on the ground. So what we're gonna face is
Major General Padan, could I ask you? So you shared that once we go from this phase of the Gaza war to the next phase, it will take over a year. If I could take you back to a role that you played over 20 years ago, after you took control of Judea and Samaria, there was a first phase, and then in terms of cleaning it up, the actual terrorists, was that also something that took a year to 2 years after the first intensive phase?
So after 2002, after the large operation in Judea and Samaria, it took us almost 5 years to clean the cities of Judea and Samaria. We have to remember that Judea and Samaria is a little bit bigger than Gaza Strip by all means, by population and real estate and land. But yes, it takes a lot of time to clean the area from terrorists. You have to remember that terrorists are like using civilian clothes on a daily basis, looking like a regular worker that wake up in the morning and go to work, and then they're hiding and creating cells. They're working under the radar of the IDF, and it's a huge challenge to find them and to arrest them or tackle them. It's going to take time. It's not only going to take time. I think that over the time, we'll still face here and there launching of rocket, launching of anti-tank missiles. I mean, we're going to fight those terrorists for the next year. It's not going to be like two at the park that go from one house to another. It's a war. Not on the same level that we're facing today, but it's a war. So
if anything, what you're saying is that it's actually a shorter timetable than what you had to deal with 20 years ago.
Absolutely. The result of the maneuver in Gaza Strip is a good surprise, if I can say good about what's going on there. But we all assume that it's going to take longer. We have a lot of friction. People, I don't know if you remember, people spoke about 300 soldiers that we're gonna lose every week. That's not a result, thank God. The IDF show very good professional, creative way of maneuver into the cities of Gaza, facing a lot of challenges, but doing a great job from tactical point of view. And I must tell you, I haven't been to Israel the last 4 days, but before that, I've escorted a group of professionals from the US and Britain. They were amazed from the way that the IDF maneuvered to the city of Gaza. So the fact that they are doing well doesn't mean that everything is great. There is friction. We have thousands of soldiers inside Gaza. People are sometimes getting tired, doing mistakes. Every mistake costs, unfortunately. It's going to be a long, long challenge. And by the way, not only physically, but mentally, and from that perspective, what we are doing as the FIDF is significantly important. Increase the spirit and the mental ability of the IDF to deal with those long-term challenges. That's maybe the most important thing that we can deliver. If the U.S. government deliver ammunition, well, delivering different kind of ammunition, spiritual ammunition, that charge the unit, the soldier, and allow them to win this war. Israel, I mean, generally speaking, but specifically the commander and the soldier, the men and women that are fighting every day in Gaza Strip.
But what you said, I think it's very important for those who are participating on this briefing to understand. What was a 5-year goal and objective 20 years ago, because of the success of the first 2 phases of the war, what you're saying is something that could be a 12 to 18-month goal in terms of Gaza. And people have to understand that. You know, but people want everything yesterday. But the reality is, what you're saying is that they've done so well that phase 3 may be achievable in 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, and again, having said that, it doesn't mean that there will be no rocket launching and no RPG launching. We're gonna face it for the next few years, even. I can say. I mean, it's gonna be the idea of Hamas are still there. If I have to go back to the first sentences that I opened with, we're not gonna eliminate all our challenges along the border. That we're gonna keep dealing with Hezbollah, with the Iranian, with Hamas, with other terrorist Palestinian terrorist group like Islamic Jihad and other. But we hope to be able to deal with it like we dealt with it before October 7, with our regular soldier that doing security routine along the border in Judea and Somalia and other places, and create kind of a normality that allowed Israel to build itself, to launch those prosperity roots of high tech that built the nation of Israel the last few years. And I'm truly optimistic about it. If we'll be together, if we'll be strong enough, we can create a situation that while fighting those terrorists to the next few years and allowing the state of Israel to build itself.
General Padan, we have about 4 minutes left on the briefing. Could you share some insights into the north?
So there is interesting thing that happened right now in Lebanon. There is a delegation from the US, actually the same group that negotiate Hezbollah in the state of Lebanon during the marital agreement, the marital accord to the agreement that we have with Lebanon. Hopefully they'll find some kind of diplomatic agreement, in a way go back to 1701 agreement that we had after 2006 in Lebanon. When Hezbollah starts speaking about and doing shvits about what they achieved along the border, you understand that there is negotiations. So hopefully they'll have some kind of offer, some kind of agreement, some kind of a result of those meeting in Lebanon. And if not, we'll have to fight it. I mean, well, when it comes to Lebanon, I'm not so sure that we'll have to launch huge ground maneuver into Lebanon. Maybe we can solve most of our challenges with the Air Force and do very limited maneuver to the area close to the border and destroy their post inability to launch attack like October 7 in Lebanon. But while fighting Hezbollah, we have to remember that Hezbollah have the ability to cover most of Israel with rocket and missiles. So it's going to be a challenge. And again, what we're saying every time that we're speaking about what happened at the north, we are saying that we have to finish and focus on what's going on at the south and then move to Lebanon. Again, it's not going to be like a white flag in Gaza Strip and the war is ended, and then we'll move our forces to the north. We'll get into the third stage, to a situation that allowed us to release part of the forces that are focusing right now at the south and move them to the north, and allow ourselves to solve the problem with Hezbollah while continue our operation at the south. So the meaning is not that everything going to be finished and then done at the south, but when the situation at the south will allow us to release part of the troops and be focused in what's going on at the north, we'll do it. And I guess that we have a few weeks until we have the ability to move a division from the south to the north.
So on Wednesday, when we have our next briefing scheduled, we'll ask you, what you're hearing about the negotiations, about issues on the ground, as well as what's happening in the general theater with all of the Iranian proxies. This is a very complicated, it's a very, how should I say, it's not a very stable situation that we're dealing with, and things change on a dime. If there are no major emergencies, we'll be back with Major General Padan on Wednesday for further updates and analysis. To all those who participated, we want to thank you. And again, we are getting requests, I would say, not every day of the week, but probably 5 to out of the 7-day week. We're getting requests from the Army probably 5 days a week. We need the support. There are a number of parlor meetings that are happening this week. Please continue with your support. We're profoundly grateful on behalf of the soldiers, and we're profoundly honored and proud to be able to support these soldiers, as they not only create a sense of stability, morality for the Middle East, they create a sense of stability and morality for the world. And again, wishing everyone a meaningful 2024. We want to thank Major General Padan. We want to thank Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, and wishing everyone a good day.